Everybody, this is Going Public. I'm Harry McCullough. We're joined today by David Rabley, Executive Director of the Terrebonne Port Commission. Man, thanks for being with us. What's happening? What's the latest?
Well, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. The H&C maintenance dredging was completed in March, so we kind of hoping that we keep it all summer long, barring a storm, but we're going to monitor it. The last 10-mile section was dredged to minus 18, so it's good to go. You know, we so far so good. So we just gonna keep holding on to it.
Oh yeah, and it's hurricane season.
That's
so we
true,
started
yeah.
that on June 1st. So
That's true. You didn't have to remind me.
Yeah. so we'll see how that goes. But what's the status right now on the deepening process?
Well, the deepening is like we talked about last time. There's a bunch of different fronts we're working on. We got financing of all of it, and there's different parts. We have local match. We have, the Corps doing a big portion of it. But before the work plan, the work budget has just come out. Okay, so they create the budget, and then they come out with a work plan, and it goes to the Corps. And in that process, the $350,000 that Garrett was able to get for us is going to the Corps. So now they're now started the preliminary engineering design, and we also I got Scalise to I did an appropriation request to Scalise for $2.5 million for next year, so that they can continue the design after they do the preliminary. And that has been forwarded, so that's a good sign that we're going to get that money next year. So that's where we are on the federal side, and that's basically just the design. Okay, the port or the local match. Okay, so let's break this down. So we have the federal government, and then we have the non-federal sponsor, which is the state. It's the port and the parish. And in all of that process, we have, we split the money up. Let's see, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. Let me back up a little bit. Okay. So right now, the deepening, let's go through what they passed on the federal level. The port submitted the appropriation request. We just talked about that. The Corps of Engineers released its work plan, which we just mentioned, on May 25th. The work plan lays out how much and how much funding and where it can be used from the federal government. Construction received $2.5 billion. This is total all over the country. Investigations got $143 million. Operations received $4.5 billion. The Mississippi River and tributaries received $370 million. And all of this, out of all of that money, we $923 million, $9.23 million goes to maintenance for next year, and also the $350,000 that Garrett got for us. Okay, so now we're going to get into the local match stuff, which is the pipeline lowering and all that stuff. Okay, so that's funded by the state. Gis Engineering has been compiling data on the pipelines, the oyster leases, and the right-of-ways. They're working on phase one, which we broke it up into 3 phases. Phase 1 is going to be from Cocodrie all the way to the Gulf. We're going to get
The lower 16.
the lower 16-mile section, and we're going to get that done first. That's the most critical area anyway. Okay, so once it's determined who's responsible for the pipelines, after we locate them, who's responsible to lower them, we make agreements with the pipeline companies. It could be anywhere from $2 million to $5 million to lower them, and it could take as long as a couple years, okay, by the time you get into the whole process. We can't make any agreements with these pipeline companies until we have funding in place, which is what we've been working with the capital outlay money. So that brings us to question number 3.
Yeah. So as you're talking about, the home and nav and the deepening, so who is responsible for all that money? Because you're talking years at a time, and how it all goes about.
Right. So the federal government breaks up big projects like this, a federal match and a local match, and this project is 80% and 20%. So the feds are going to pay 80. The state or the local match is 20%, and it also includes it's not only the construction match, it's also we have to do stuff here locally that they won't even touch. And lower all the pipelines, do all the right-of-ways. It's called LERDs. It's land easements, right-of-ways, relocations, and disposal areas. And that's what we're responsible for on top of the 20% of the construction.
So feds don't touch the LERDs.
Right. So they monitor it, but they don't pay for it.
Correct.
So the state of Louisiana agreed to fund it through DOTD. So the deepening study estimated a total cost of the project at $255 million. This amount includes the costs associated with LERDs as well. So the federal share in a monetary amount is $177 million, and the state share or the non-federal share is $78 million. Okay, so that's all going to come out of capital outlay, in which the session just finished on the state level, and it finished Monday actually, and we survived. We got our $20 million that we requested this year. Now it's still not etched in stone. It's got to go through the bond commission. So the bond commission is going to vote on it probably in the next month or two. And then once that happens, then we'll do an agreement with the state, and then the money's there for us to use as we need for this project. And so we're looking forward to that because, you know, all the work that we've been doing for the last 6 months, we've been kind of locating and you know, knowing which ones we're going to have to negotiate. So now the money's going to be available. We're going to be ready to sit down and negotiate and get that process started.
Yeah, so you know all the players. You've been dealing, you know, you've been looking at this,
Yes.
you know, the home and nav for so long.
Yes.
You know all the players that are involved in the LERDs and everything else.
That's right. So from a 10,000 foot level, we're orchestrating this project on a financial front at both the state and federal level, trying to keep those funding mechanisms going. Because if there's one hiccup in the funding, we're gonna lose the ground with the progress. So we want to try to get this finished. The lock and floodgate that the levee district's going to be building for the Morganza project, which they've already started, is going to be completed and operable in about 3.5 years. So we want to have everything that we got to do ahead of this deepening done and be ready to enter into a contract with a dredge company to get it started when it opens up.
You got to wait till they finish theirs to get.
Yeah, there's an agreement that we can't dig until the lock and floodgate is operable. It's in place.
Because actually, I would imagine that makes a difference on the lock and the deepening, right?
Well, what happens is, you know, the fear is saltwater intrusion. So if we go 5 foot deeper,
deep, right.
if we go 5 foot deeper and don't have anything to block the salt water, we could be vulnerable if we have a slug of salt coming up the channel, which happens every so often. Right. So they just out of precaution, they wanted to make sure that doesn't happen. So they're going to make sure it's all finished and operable, and then we can start.
And you guys have to work hand in hand with a lot of that. And I guess you're talking to a lot of the same people, right?
Right.
But
right.
Our delegation is obviously involved with levee protection as well as.
That's correct. They overseeing it all, and so it's, you know, it's complicated, you know, and our legislators have a tough job, you know. So and we're there just to kind of push them and remind them of our little projects, you know, because everybody's got has projects. So anyway, so that's where we are. But you know, I gotta hand it to our delegation on the state level. Jerome Zarang, Tanner McGee, Barrow Amadi on the House side, Brett Allen, and Mike Fazy on the Senate side. I mean, look, they hit a grand slam this year. And special thanks to Jerome and Tanner. They are well positioned. And they are very good at what they do, and they've helped this area a lot.
Right.
So,
they definitely know our number one needs around this area, and they play to that for sure.
Exactly. So the regular session ended Monday. HB 1, which is the capital outlay bill, is the state's $39 billion annual operating budget, and is based on $10.9 billion from state taxes, royalties and fees, and an additional $20 billion in federal funds and various fund transfers. Now that's not just HB 1; that's the whole budget. Right. HB 1 is just the capital outlay bill that is used to fund projects around the state. But also included in that budget for the state is funding for teacher pay raises. They also have $300 million for a new Mississippi River bridge in Baton Rouge and $100 million for a bridge in Lake Charles.
Yeah, it's a big budget. You know, those
It
guys
is.
Don't stop at seven figures. Now they're at nine figures. They're billions.
It's
now.
amazing, yeah.
Yeah, as the budget is so big. What 20 billion? What 10.9?
It's 39 billion.
39 billion. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. And the operating budget, like I say, that has grown so much over the years.
Right.
And there's a lot of money involved. You know, they got a lot of that money from the feds that they were
You
able
had
to play with
COVID,
different
you
stuff.
had a bunch of different, the hurricanes, there's money everywhere. So,
Yeah, there was a lot of money, and those guys had to decide where to spend it. They didn't. It was a different session, right? So
Yeah.
they could make a lot of people happy, and they didn't have to lay people off like they normally
Right,
do, right?
right.
So it's a little different, and they didn't get caught up.
But-
It didn't seem in too many of those
Yeah.
little issues or federal or sometimes some of those big issues can get in the way of the job that we need done. So
Absolutely.
that's real important. So let's take a break, David, and we'll be right back to talk more about what's going on with the Terrebonne Port Commission. We'll be right back right here on Going Public.
In South Louisiana, storms are a way of life. Every storm poses a different threat, whether from flooding or hurricane-force winds. At All South Consulting Engineers, we help protect our people from these disasters. Before a storm, we work with our leaders to prevent catastrophic damage. After the storm, we help get the resources needed for rebuilding. We have helped our cities, parishes, and school boards recover over $2 billion to rebuild our community. We'll be here for the next one.
A new company with a lot of history. GIS Engineering has rapidly grown its brand around an experienced team of professionals. GIS Engineering is a full-service planning, engineering, procurement, and construction management company specializing in coastal protection and restoration, upstream and downstream industrial, and transportation infrastructure projects. Putting people first, GIS Engineering, a new company with a lot of history.
Led by a 7-member commission, the Terrebonne Port was created to assist our local industry in promoting economic development. We monitor government regulations that affect our local industry and work with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to secure maintenance dredging funds. Because the HNC is the main artery for the heartbeat of Terrebonne's economy, Terrebonne Port fights a constant battle for funding to maintain the federally authorized navigable depth. We are now leasing waterfront and non-waterfront property. Terrebonne Port Commission, serving our industry to keep Terrebonne thriving.
Hey everybody, welcome to Going Public. I'm Harry McCullough. We're here with David Ravelay, the Executive Director of the Terrebonne Port Commission. We were talking about the budget, and they did have a lot of money on hand this year. Obviously, there's got a lot of money coming from the feds. They're trying to do Build Back Better. There's infrastructure. They're
Right.
trying to do a lot of that stuff.
Stimuluses and all that stuff, yeah.
All of that stuff. But these things are not going to last forever. So that's part of your job.
That's
Is
correct.
to look down the road and see how you can be more effective and as judicious with the money you do have.
Exactly. And so I misspoke on the first segment. I said HB1 was the capital outlay. HB1 is the state's operating budget. That's the $39 billion annual operating budget. HB2 is the capital outlay bill. I don't know what the total amount of the capital outlay bill is, but I know I got my money. So I mean and this area did very well. So although we did have a big budget surplus, the state's economists have warned of a future plateau or slump in tax collections that could begin in 2023-24 as COVID funding wanes. Also, that we have a half-cent sales tax on the book books that will it generates 420 million a year, and it's going to expire in 2025. So there was some talk about doing something with that during this session, but I don't think anything was. But it's something to watch. Okay.
Let me get off of that just a bit. Inflation, right?
Yeah.
How do you worry about that? Obviously, inflation now is up to 9-10%. And where, so the cost of you doing something and trying to plan it 3 years from now, how does that affect your budgeting?
Well, you always have that, just cost of living increases, but and you can't budget for inflation. I mean, it's just like our personal lives. We just have to, cut and
Cost of fuel,
do what we got to do to get through it, But yeah, it's not a, we don't get any extra money because of inflation, so we just have to budget a little tighter.
I imagine, those boats that are deepening the channel, they probably use a lot of diesel fuel, right?
Absolutely.
And if it's at $10 a gallon, it's going to be a lot more expensive to do a project like that.
Yeah, I mean, the industry is gonna hurt just because of the high prices, But one thing that we'll benefit from is that any increased production because of all of that will fall on us, and it'll help us in the economy.
Yeah,
so.
it goes back to the 80s, right? Between Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan, the rest of the country, was really hurting.
And we were doing well.
We were doing great.
We always the
and
opposite.
it flipped the other way.
That's right.
So, which brings us to, there's a lot of talk of wind energy, right?
Yes.
And there's green and there's blue energy, right? There's also hydrogen down the road, but let's talk about wind specifically. What's the status of that concept, and how can Terrebonne be in a position to capitalize from it?
Well, it's a good question. I recently met with Secretary of LED, Louisiana Economic Development, Don Pearson, and discussed the upcoming opportunities that offshore wind is gonna give our area. He indicated that the state has identified an area in the Gulf of Mexico to do wind farm leases, but before they do theirs, the Interior Department is going to do one in the Gulf of Mexico as well. But the Interior Department just recently in California opened up leases offshore California for wind farms. And they predict that it's 370,000 acres and could support more than 4.2 gigawatts of offshore wind energy. Okay, now I'm not an electrician, so I don't know. That's a lot, though.
Yeah.
That's enough to power more than 1.5 million homes. So that's what they're looking at in California. But they did identify an area in the Gulf of Mexico for the federal waters, and they plan to start these leases on this area next spring.
Do you have any idea how they pick those areas? Is it because there's more wind in those areas?
Yes,
Because
they did studies, and they look at the most optimal place to place them, and that's where they came up with the locations.
Yeah, and obviously they couldn't be around the loop or a lot of those issues.
And well, you got to remember, these things take up a lot of room. They're huge, and
birds.
Yeah, and so they're gonna have an area where you can't enter. You have to stay a certain way.
It's similar to that.
Yeah, and so you can't just put them anywhere. So you got to have a lot of room. You got to have room to get around them and that sort of stuff. So, on the East Coast, Block Island, they have a wind farm that was recently completed. It's America's first offshore wind installation, and it was largely constructed and serviced by Louisiana companies. South Louisiana needs to be the supply chain for the offshore wind in America, and that's what we're working towards. It's going to be a lot of fabrication, a lot of deliveries.
Stuff we do go out.
A lot of deliveries, a lot of installations and maintenance. So it's a little different animal than the oil and gas, but there are some similarities, and we're hoping that we need
to get in there,
dive in there, and get it done. So
that's something we do well, and it's something that we could deliver right from this area.
Absolutely.
We'd have access to it.
Absolutely.
That would be great. I talked about blue energy would be hydrogen, right?
Yeah.
And they're talking about that down in the future too. So those are all things coming. I know
And
liquefied natural gas is
Yeah.
going to have a couple of ports on our area. So these are all areas we can get into as far as the
Right.
construction of those.
And if you look at the the amount of hydrocarbons that comes out of the earth, and let's just take the United States. You know, we extract them out of the ground, and then it's released in the atmosphere when we burn them or whatever. But if you look at all the hydrocarbons that come out of the ground, and put it in a circle, okay, a pie chart, and separate it into 3 sections. One section is all the hydrocarbons that they send to chemical plants, and it makes plastics. They make all kinds of stuff, okay? Green energy or any of that energy will never take any of that away, okay? That's something that's going to
We're gonna
remain.
need that pie, right?
They're going to need that forever, okay? The second slice will be the slice that fuels your vehicles, okay? So what's happening now? Electric cars. So electric cars are going to take some of that energy off of that pie slice. How much? I don't know, but you know, it might be. I've heard it could be 5 or 10% over the next 10 years. You know,
And
then
increased demand for electricity.
Right. So then the third one is the electricity for your home, okay, for your heating and everything else, and that's going to be replaced, or it's going to be taken up somewhat by the wind farms, okay. How much? We don't know, but I can guarantee you, I would imagine the technology is just not there yet to just totally, you know, use wind energy. And you saw what happened last year in Texas when it got cold. Everything froze and they didn't have any power. Right. Okay, so you always have to have that backup power for sure. And you're going to continue to have oil and gas because of the chemical plants and because that the wind energy is not going to fuel everything that we use the hydrocarbons for. So we'll always have an oil and gas industry, especially for our lifetime.
Yeah, we need it. I mean, we haven't produced a lot of.
Unfortunately, right now, presently, the administration, the national administration, is. They trying to shut the oil and gas energy down because they want everybody to
Right.
get the green energy, which is okay, but they're just doing it a little. I think they're going to have to, you know, put the brakes on that, and I think it's already starting where they're going to want us to produce more and more oil on the short term because of the war in Ukraine and you know the fact that
One thing like that happens, we shutting down refineries over here, so that's one of the main reasons the cost of fuel is the way it is. So.
Exactly, and we can't, you know, I understand the administration's
They're trying to get
want to get this. I love the environment, but we're not going to be able to just shut one off and start the other one, and that's kind of what they're trying to do, it seems like. So hopefully they back off on that a little bit, and we got midterms coming up, and hopefully we can get some, you know, some different people in the House of Representatives, and maybe we can stop this and just continue to work on the green energy,
right?
But don't just cut off the oil and gas until we can, okay? Which I don't think we ever will. You know?
I think you're exactly right.
So,
if we could find another way to power our vehicles, it'd probably go a long way
Yeah.
in emitting greenhouse, carbon emissions. But you can also use plastics, obviously that saves a lot of things, right?
We could all have a little windmill on our cars, you know, and just go down the road and yeah.
I mean, we also not going to stop hurricanes, and I guess they're going to build those to hurricane strength.
Yeah,
as far as that,
there's
those
some things that they do too. They can lower the windmill and
Right.
you know
Maybe blow
fold
it
it
the other
in
way.
or whatever. So. Because, they're pretty big. I don't know, you know, it seemed like that would be the best time to have them operate, you know, with
Seemed
the
like-
hurricane,
Boy,
because you
you're
can
right.
make some electricity, you know. But I don't know if it works like that, Harry, but, you know, in my world, it would,
It would
you
be
know.
spinning, that's for sure.
It would be good. But, yeah, you know, this green energy is all good. I mean, it's going to help the environment. But, you know, I guess the fallacy is that they're not going to be able to just shut off the oil and gas, and we're going to continue to have an oil and gas industry. It just depends on how much they allow us to utilize it.
Right.
You know?
And like I say, and these new industries coming aboard, if we can manage jobs out of there, creating platforms, doing all those kind of things,
Then we
we're
don't
real
miss a
good at.
step.
We could be right in position to be doing it.
Exactly.
So, I think this area is set up, and we got to have the foresight to see it. But we're set up to be in a good spot in the future.
Yes.
Well, David Rabelais, Executive Director of Terrebonne Port Commission. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Harry.
We appreciate it. Thanks for watching Going Public. We'll see you next time right here on HTV.